Good morning, Mortgage Coach community. On behalf of Dave Savage and the entire team at Mortgage Coach, I am Todd Bookspan, the founder of Win by Noon, and I am so excited for today's call. When Dave told me that he was going to hand over the reins, I thought, gosh, how can I make an impactful call 1 month into 2019? Who can I bring on, and what can we talk about? And I did that in opposite order. I actually said, you know what, let me reach out to my buddy, Josh Mettle, legend here in our Mortgage Coach community, and let me see what he wants to talk about. So welcome, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be here with you. And I think this is the first time we've seen each other in 2019. So we've spoken, but we haven't seen each other. So I'm stoked to be here with you for the next hour.
You know, it's a lot of fun. And, you know, most of you know that Josh and I go back, gosh, 6-7 years maybe.
I think it might be longer than that, man. We've been coaching in similar groups for at least that long.
Yeah, so we go way back and we hang out with a bunch of entrepreneurs a few times a year together. And so, you know, I always feel fortunate to get to spend time with you, Josh, and I appreciate you because you're so disciplined and focused and normally don't take time out of your committed activities to do things like this. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I'm totally breaking the theme of today's call, which is mindset and routine. So I'm out of my routine to be here with you, but happy to do it. This is going to be fun.
Well, so let's sort of set the stage. I mean, one of the things that, you know, I believe is that, you know, everyone's all over the board in 2019. I talked to some people and they're already feel like they're off to the races. They've got huge momentum and they're going great. And then I talked to people at the other end of the spectrum who are struggling. I've already seen a couple of Win by Noon realtors leave the business. I've seen one Win by Noon loan officer leave the business. What are you hearing? What are you seeing out there in the field?
Well, I think we're in the midst of this shift that maybe this is the third year. I think I've been feeling this shift where there's massive amounts of margin compression and price shoppers. Obviously, we've lost refinances. There's a lot of focus on realtor business. And you know, I'm starting to see, even we had 2 loan officers in our branch actually leave the business. And these are loan officers that have been being fed some leads. So it's not like they're on their own to generate leads, but they both just decided that they found greener pastures in another profession. Also talked to a couple realtors that are having similar type thought process. So you know, I think this is going to be a great call. I think today, right now, is the time to decide what your mindset's going to be for 2019, what the winning routines you need to implement to achieve those goals, and either decide if you're in the industry or out, because I don't think 2019 is going to get any easier. So that means we need to get tougher.
I love it. And, you know, to quote both of our former coaches, Bill Hart, right? I think you've got to decide if you said in or out. I think you got to decide to be all in or out, right? I think that's the real key. And, you know, it's been kind of fun because we've been talking in this community. One of the books that Dave brought up recently was David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. And then you brought it up. And so I'm like, all right, and I've heard this thing too many times from too many smart people. And he certainly exemplifies mindset. We've talked about Jocko before, Willink, right? Discipline is freedom. We've talked about Darren Hardy and the compound effect. And, you know, when you said, hey, let's talk about mindset, where do you think we should start?
Well, I think we need to start by accepting the fact that this isn't going to be an easy year, a downhill year, right? It's going to be uphill. And I kicked off the call and said it's all downhill from here. It's actually all uphill from here. I said that wrong. But I think that, you know, like any good steep trail up the mountain, when you get to the top, you're going to feel great, but you need to know that there's a lot of work ahead. So I think one of the things, if you haven't read the book that you mentioned by Goggins, Can't Hurt Me, and that book's all about mindset. And it's not even really a business book, but it's probably the best book I've ever read, listened to actually, on mindset. And one of the common themes in there is that difficulty, struggle, pain, all of that is there for a reason to get you to a higher place. I'm reminded of, you know, our theme for our mortgage group has always been serving doctors and other medical professionals. And it's funny, that came out of the 2008-2010 crash. You know, I built my mortgage practice for the previous 10 years on investors. So I was doing loans for people that were doing investment properties, and that obviously got exploded in front of my eyes. We went from closing 350 transactions, myself and an assistant and a processor, to having 2 loans in the pipeline. That was scary. And it was in that moment, that complete implosion, that we found that I had been doing some loans for doctors and started creating some strategies around marketing. And 10 years later, that's probably been the greatest thing that has ever happened to me professionally. And I guarantee you I wouldn't have stumbled on that if the market wouldn't have imploded and there wouldn't have been that massive amount of pain and friction that caused me to go out and find something new that I've been riding now for the last 10 years. So I guess in regards to your question, friction is good, uphill is good, pain is good if you interpret it that way. And if you have the mindset that I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to find the angle that the other loan officer or realtor isn't seeing, and I'm going to innovate and create, and I'm going to be on my A game. So that's what comes to me when you ask me, where do we start off with mindset?
So I love that. So there's a bunch of things that I'll throw up there. Number one is if you're going to do Can't Hurt Me by Goggins, do the audio version. Just know he drops a lot of F-bombs in it, but there's a lot of extra commentary you won't get in the book. Number two is, of course, I can remember us in New Mexico at Masters Coach when you laid out the doctor plan and you were so committed to it. And so I think as we talk through, I don't want to use the word getting scrappy in a shifting market, but I know that seems to be a common theme of top producers, right? Top producers, when the market shifts, don't go after the shiny objects. They step back and they say, okay, I got to get scrappy and try something different, but I can't go the same way to the same shiny object everybody is. And so I always want to say, like, look at someone like Josh who picked out a different opportunity. He didn't buy something new. He created something new. He looked back. He spent time reviewing what was working and where there was opportunity, and then he executed at a high level, which is where the routine piece comes in. And I think that the routine piece, I divide it into two different types of routines. Actually, no, 3 now, thanks to our conversation, Josh. One is, what is your personal routine, right, outside of the office? 2 is, what is your daily routine when you get into the office? And then 3 is now this new idea that you gave me of the restore weekend. What is your weekend process to make sure that you're refreshed and ready to go when you get in the office on Monday? So I always know that you're a super disciplined guy. And one of the all-time top calls last year was when you got on and you talked about your office routine, your gratitude meeting, and setting in your intentions. But can you quickly share your 2019 Josh Mettle morning routine and then maybe the evening routine piece?
Yeah, you bet. And before we get off mindset, as you were talking, there were a few other things that hit me. So if you're rolling into 2019 and you're not feeling 100% up to the challenge, like the challenge is daunting and it's intimidating a little bit, that's okay, right? We've totally all been there. So there's 3 books that I think I would recommend for you to dig into, get them on Audible, read them, just start digesting these books. The first one is Can't Hurt Me by Goggins, Extreme Ownership by Jocko, and just his whole, the stuff he has on his YouTube channel is really exceptional. A lot of stuff on his podcast I find really interesting, but his whole mindset around good. Do you remember his mindset around good, Todd? If something bad happens and, let's say somebody died, but if something completely went foobar, and one of his reports would come in, he'd look him in the eye and say, good, now what are you going to do to figure it out? In other words, just that mindset of whatever that challenge is, there's a reason for it. And then the third one that just came to me is Obstacle is the Way, which is a book all about stoicism by Ryan Holiday. And that book was really a transformational book for me in terms of thinking and understanding a little bit about stoicism. So just want to give those 3 books, and then I'll answer your question.
Love it. Love it. In fact, I've read 2 of the 3. So now Obstacle is the Way is now on the book list. That'll be next. Thanks.
Obstacle is the Way is a total winner, man. One of my all-time favorites. Okay, so routine. So for me, and again, now that I think about it, my routine came out of the last crash as well. When I went from 350 personal loans a year to 2 loans in the pipeline, I was completely panicked. I thought I was going to lose my wife, my real estate holdings. I mean, I thought it was over. And so I started waking up crazy early and doing a bunch of research on online marketing and thinking about how I could create websites and marketing to doctors. And with that, really fear and paranoia at that time came the evolution of my morning routine and full daily routine. A lot of help from Coach Bill Hart, who I think was the first one I ever heard say, what are you going to do by noon? And his thesis for that was, look, if you had to go home at noon for a medical injury or to support a spouse or a child, what if you could create the first half of your day that was so impactful that if you went home by noon, you would still be getting ahead, and to have that kind of drive and focus till noon. And I said, wow, that's really brilliant. And I think it was Rockefeller that said, I might get this quote wrong with who said it, but they said, what's the secret to success? Wake up early and strike oil.
Oil helps in his scenario.
Yeah, oil helps. But the wake up early, I'm like, I can control half of that equation. I'm just gonna wake up early. So I started waking up very early. My alarm clock now is set for usually right around 3:30 a.m. And don't get caught up on that. It doesn't really matter if it's 3:30 a.m. or 5 or 6 or whatever. Just the point is, get a routine. What Darren Hardy describes in The Compound Effect as a calibration appointment with yourself in the morning, where you start very intentional. So for me, it's 20 ounces of warm water. It's my vitamin routine. I have a fireplace next to my computer that I turn on. After the vitamins are in, coffee gets brewed. I've got my favorite mushroom coffee that has all kinds of neurostimulators so I can get my brain going. And I implemented meditation last year. So I'll do 10 to 15 minutes of meditation. If any of you are into Brian Johnson, he's got a great podcast series. He just did, it's called Optimize. And he just did a 2-part series on a Stanford study that was just released about meditation. Did you see this?
I did, because I read Ariana Huffington's book that he quoted in there.
Yeah. And basically that Stanford study says meditation's essentially the magic pill. You fall asleep faster, you sleep longer, your memory is improved, your cardiovascular stats are better. Your body's just in this balanced state when you do meditation. So anyways, check that out, Brian Johnson Optimize. So meditation for 15 minutes. And then I jump into reviewing really quickly one account out of my life plan. So I turn on my computer at that point. I've got my morning routine or appointment with myself called the Calibration Appointment in my calendar. I open that up. I look through one account in my life plan, and then I roll into the rest, the most important thing that I want to accomplish for that morning. So for me, we do a lot of consumer direct lead gen. We generate about 8,000 online leads a year. And so I'm creating content, whether that's scripting out a video, writing an article, working with my loan officers on a particular marketing plan. We just brought some loan officers in that work with builders. So one morning I was creating a marketing piece for builders. But I'm going to knock that out, and I'm going to get somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour of uninterrupted time creating. And then from there, it's workout. We're in the office by 8:15. We do a quick 15-minute gratitude meeting with all of our loan officers. That's elective, not mandatory. And then we go 2 hours of prospecting to 10 to 10:30. That oftentimes kicks to me till 11 or 12. So I try not to schedule anything else before noon. And then from noon on I'm really reactive from noon on. So it's lunch appointments, office appointments, client appointments, anything else I need to get in happens between then and 5:15, I'm out, I'm headed home, phone's off on airplane mode, and I'm ready to chill and hang out with my family and get ready for the next day.
And you go to bed early. So when people heard that 3:30 and they're still stuck on that, I mean, you're so focused on sleep, right? You were the first person, you and John Downs, who talked to me about sleep cycles. And so you're in bed early too, correct?
Yeah. So the first couple of years out of the crash, I was sleeping crazy bad. I mean, I was going to bed at 8 and I was waking up at like 1:30 or 2. Man, I was panicked. I've slowly regained my sleep as I've built out my team around me, so that I've delegated more and more. So yeah, I'm usually to sleep between 7:30 and 8. That's what, I've got a 7 and a 9-year-old kid. They're reading books. I put them to sleep at that time, and then I'm out. And so by 3:30, I've got a full 5 sleep sessions, which is 7.5 hours sleep cycles.
Yeah, and that's huge. So, I mean, be thinking about this as you're hearing Josh talk through it, right? It's this whole idea that routine personally to get your mind rolling. I'm a huge fan of meditation too. And the whole sleep thing has just been a game changer for me health-wise. And I've just talked now to, regardless of the industry, so many people who are the best of the best at what they do are focused on the body first, right? The mind, and they're really doing these things. And the meditation studies are pretty incredible. You also, at your gratitude meeting, you guys set intentions, which I love that word intentions, because I think what happens when you go through a shift like we're going through, if you're worried about what's going on and you feel overwhelmed, number one, the meditation helps, a routine helps. And it's not like, oh, maybe today I'll do it. It's an everyday thing. And then the other part is when you're intentional about your routine, you set your intentions for the day. I find that people then are able to block out that other noise. It's not about, am I in a good mood or a bad mood? It's not, am I worried or I'm not worried? Hey, I'm intentional. I've got something I got to get done. What does that look like for your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So every morning we meet at 8:15. We call it a gratitude meeting. We go around the room and we just and we've been doing this for, I think we're in our 5th year, maybe 6 years. And we just say, hey, I'm grateful. So for me this morning, it was leg day and I got up, it was cold, it's snowing outside, and went to the gym with my wife and did all my front squats, all my back squats, all the running I was supposed to do. And I was just grateful that I got up and I did that. And I wanted to share that with the team. I felt like the battle was behind me, so to speak, for the day. And then once we say the one thing that we're grateful for, we'll just say, what's the one thing that you want to accomplish today? What is it that you have to nail today? So for me, the thing that I was really excited about was this event with you. And then I also have an under contract that I wanted to get commitment and move forward and get that off into processing today. So those are my things I had. My intention was set on making sure I delivered on those 2 things.
And so then you guys go straight into minimum of 2 hours of what you call lead gen time, right? And so one of the things that you wanted to do was line this up to win by noon. So I'll sort of throw in some win by noon, kind of side by sides. And I got a couple of slides I think that'll play in here really well. For you guys, that is not optional, correct? That's a mandatory 2 hours.
Yeah, and there's actually a question in here from James Barnes. Thanks for the question, and I'd encourage you guys to ask more questions into the chat. I'll be looking at that. But there's a question that says, when you say prospecting for 2 hours, how do you define that? So what we did with our phone systems is we forwarded those phone systems for all of our loan officers to what we call our office manager. And she has some scripting around how she answers those phone calls in a way that doesn't feel like you're being screened. But Josh is in a client consultation right now. Let me see if he is able to break free. I'm not sure where he's at in that consultation. Can I get your name and what it's regarding? Then she'll shoot me an instant message and I'll say, no, I'm prospecting. But I'm deferring or deflecting as much interruptions away as possible. If it's one of my top 5 realtors, she's gonna say, top 5 realtor, pick up the phone. But 95% is deflected away. And then what we're doing with that time, once we've gotten all the phone calls off of us, is we are calling any leads that we have from either online or realtors, any clients that may have been stalled out in gathering documents that we need to move forward in order to get them pre-approved, any pre-approvals that we want to check out how their house hunting's going, how their realtor's working out. Can I take them away from maybe a realtor that isn't effective and introduce them to one of the realtors I work with that is effective? Past client reviews, realtors that we need to touch. We have a certain number of realtors that we want to touch every week. And it is literally outbound, what's called green activity. So every single one of those phone calls could result in us being able to serve another client. And if you start making phone calls during your prospecting time that couldn't result in you serving another client, then you're not prospecting.
So think about that, everyone. They have their phones rerouted, right? You can't, like, even if I call Josh's cell phone, it rings to his office manager, right? I mean, that is a level of discipline that most people don't have. If it's up to you and your phone rings, what are you going to do? You're going to answer it. And so they've set up a system around this every day. It's not optional, it's mandatory. And I think that's a difference in mindset because it's built in their routine. It's not, I mean, people don't make meetings during that time, do they, Josh?
No, I mean, it's the real world, right? So if one of your top 5 realtors wants to have a meeting at that time and you can't get them off, I'm not saying I wouldn't take that meeting, but what I would do is I would say, okay, this is actually a good thing. I'm going to shift my 2 hours of prospecting that I usually do from 8:30 to 10:30. I'm going to shift that from 3 to 5, and I'm still going to time block out those 2 hours this day. And I'd ask my secretary again during that time. I'd say, hey, can you take my phones for those 2 hours? And then I'd be thinking, well, maybe I'll reach some people in the afternoon that I haven't been reaching in the morning. So maybe this is, maybe this is a blessing. But the point is to just prioritize and hold sacred your outbound prospecting and communication time.
I mean, that's the key, right? Because here's what I see out there with most loan officers is they don't try to move that meeting. They take it. It's not one of their top 5 realtors. And then they say, I'll make that 3 to 5 time my time. And then, oh my gosh, I got busy. I didn't do it. I'll just make up for it tomorrow. And then they wonder why they've inconsistent business.
Well, remember the whole point of I don't need to remind you, but the whole point behind the by noon thought process is that as we go farther and farther in our day, we get tired. That's just human nature. There's nothing wrong with you for that. So anything that's going to take full intention and energy and focus should be done as early as humanly possible. And I'll also say that in regards to exercise. I'll also say that in regards to anything that's really important, like a meditation or reviewing your life plan, if that's important to you, or creating any time of content. If there's people out there that create content that generates them leads, anything. So there's that analogy, Todd, about, you remember the rocks and the sand and the fish tank analogy?
Yep. Stephen Covey.
What is it? Is that Covey?
Yeah, it's Covey, I believe.
I never knew where that came from. So the idea is, if you take a fish tank and you've got a big pile of rocks and a big pile of sand, and you pour the sand in the fish tank first and then pour the rocks, it doesn't fit. There's too much content to fit into that amount of space. Well, if you think about it this way, the rocks are the most important things. Those are the things that you have to do. Those are your commitments that help you be a better you. And if you get the rocks in first, and then you pour the sand, which is all the other crap that we all have to do, then guess what happens? Well, then the sand fits around the rocks and it all fits into the physical space. Well, that is exactly the same thing with time. Time works the exact same way. There are things that I have to do that are scheduled, and I do them first thing in the morning, if humanly possible, so that by noon, all I got to do is deal with the sand. And what's easier to move, sand or rocks, right? The sand you can move left or right. You got to get the rocks, and you got to get those in as early as possible and create a routine around doing that. And you'll just build this, intense momentum and of success.
Well, I love it. Someone's commenting on Facebook Live, so I should be prospecting now. And it is kind of funny because the answer is yes, but it's okay if you're here. We're grateful that you're here. And then it's just that you have to make sure you're committed to that prospecting time in the afternoon. And that's the mindset piece. So it's funny, I was jumping up here. This is what Josh sent me this morning, was this slide, because ultimately, one of the things we were talking about in mindset on Sunday when Josh and I talked was, obviously it was before the Super Bowl, before Tom Brady came out and won his 6th Super Bowl. And I won't lie, I'm not a Patriots fan. I see Jeremy here and some other Patriots fans. But I've got huge respect for what they've accomplished. I have huge respect for the fact that Tom Brady's been so consistent in what he's done. And what I found in all the times I've studied the best of the best in athletics is they ignore the noise, right? Which obviously in this case, they've got to ignore the noise in the stadium is part of the analogy. They ignore the noise that we all face in the mortgage business, the realtors calling us, our team members interrupting us, clients calling because we haven't been proactively updating them. And the best of the best shine through. And so what I know is those of you on this call who are the top in the industry, you guys are going to have a great year. You're going to figure out what it takes, right? You're going to figure out what sands you got to move around or what rocks you got to change. But you've got to be able to ignore the noise. And oftentimes I find that we don't have the discipline. Like, so I applaud Josh for the fact that you guys have truly, you've made it so it's not optional whether you answer your phone or not, because it goes to your office manager. And so think about what you can do for yourself to force the discipline on you. I joke about it when I talk about Win by Noon is I used to hide out. Like I literally would drop my daughter off at 8:30 and I would go do all of those activities in either a coffee shop, the burrito place, or one of the 2 breakfast places until then I moved in the office and it could show and explain why. And so don't forget that part as well. But ultimately, what did this quote mean to you, Josh?
Yeah, I believe this came from a post Super Bowl interview, and they asked him to, talk about the year a little bit, the journey to the Super Bowl this year. And if you're a Patriots fan, you didn't have, this wasn't the Patriots' best year. They had some ups and downs and some hurt players. And the point that Bill made was, ignore all of the noise and just stick to the rocks. Stick to the routines. Stick to what works. Stick to investing in yourself and your education and the prospecting and the meditation and your intentions to get you through that day. And all of the distraction about higher rates and margin compression and all of that stuff, don't let that get you too freaked out. If you spent 90% of your time focusing on the fundamentals and the things that got you to your level of success, or if you haven't reached that level of success, maybe you spend a lot of time modeling what other people are doing successful. And then, you hear that kind of, oh yeah, margin compression, blah, okay, great, cool. I can't control that. So me spending a tremendous amount of energy being worried about another bank's lower rates or what have you, I can't really control that. All I can do is control more leads coming in the door. So I need to spend more time marketing. I need to spend more time meeting with my referral partners. I need to spend more time figuring out, well, geez, they're struggling too. How can I build their business? What loan product do I have that my realtors could go out and actually build business on? So you've got to kind of just make that shift. And that's exactly what Belichick was saying by ignore the noise. Focus on the fundamentals, focus on what you can control. And if you find yourself stressed out or worried or in paralysis, the first question you need to ask yourself is, can I control that? Nope.
I love that whole idea because ultimately in the end, I do find that oftentimes we spend time worrying about things that we can't control and or things that we can control that aren't important, right? We've all seen those circles that were drawn. It's that, I don't know what they call those fancy diagrams. I'll have to find it later and put it up in here, but it's, you've got to focus on the things that are in your control and are important, because if it's not important and not in your control, then you just really can't spend time on it. Or if it's in your control and it's not important, again, same thing. And so I threw up this slide, Josh, as we were kind of talking before, right? I think that this is the risk right now to all of us, right? Excuses, even though that's in the middle, I'm starting there, right? It's the story we tell ourselves. That's why we started with mindset, right? Distractions. How can we eliminate distractions? And sometimes it's literally just as simple as put a Post-it note on the door like I have that says, do not disturb on a webinar. What are the shiny objects out there? I mean, I'm seeing so much out there on lead generation. Now, don't get me wrong, because I'm doing stuff on lead generation. I just spoke at Gary Vee's event on lead generation. Like, it's important to me personally, but not at the expense of a daily plan of these disciplines and these priorities that Josh is talking about. And so I think that goals always plays in there. I mean, how does the goal setting play in for you and your team? Because I know that you have a big why. I know that you've got big goals. Can you address that?
Yeah, the why. I was looking at comments. I'm sorry. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, how about why and goals? I mean, is that important for you guys as a team when you're really looking at eliminating the distractions to move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So every late December, early January, our whole branch gets together, ops and origination, everybody. It's about 50 people now. And we do a goal setting meeting. And the theme of that goal setting meeting is what are your production goals? What are your personal goals? What are the obstacles that are going to get in the way? And what is the daily routine that you're going to need to create in order to achieve those goals? And we know that routine isn't going to be easy. There's going to be friction. It's going to be hard to keep that discipline going and to keep the energy that you need. We'll touch more on that later, but keep the energy you need to really be dedicated and consistent to that routine. And so you've got to identify your why. And it's just a really simple Excel spreadsheet that we created. And in the why, we're really listing out, look, if I hit this routine, if I hit these goals, if I accomplish these things that I need to accomplish this year, that's going to be a huge year for me. And here's the why behind all of that. So it has to be built into your goals. And if you haven't done that yet, hey, it's only February. It's not too late. Sit down and scribble out, where you want to go in this year, what you need to learn, what you need to achieve personally, professionally, and then get your whys down and then share it with your spouse.
Yeah, don't forget, I'll make sure that we post it up in the comments down below, whether you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube, that there's the Mortgage Coach Why worksheet, and and we'll put a link to the couple of different webinars that Dave or I have hosted on your why, because I think that's really critical, and I think that even Josh's why is in there as well. And I think that, the goal part is always interesting too, because I found that when I set goals, and then you talked about what are the disciplines, right, to get there. I mean, that's kind of that bridge. And that was sort of, I'm not a very good person when it comes to my self-promotion, other than the fact that, I do wear a Win by Noon and have them sitting behind me. But I love Josh's encouragement for me was that we sort of compare what he's got going and ironically how it lines up with Win by Noon. And so again, I threw up this other graphic that I think is kind of cool, where when you have a improved daily focus, it's going to really help you accomplish those goals.
No doubt. I mean, if you don't have intention if you haven't identified what your secrets to success is, or if you haven't identified what are the things that moves your business forward, then how can you prioritize them? So you got to get really clear on those. And then you've got to fight to really fend off all the other distractions, or as many as humanly possible. I mean, we all have kids' plays that we have to go to and things that we're going to have to break for. But, it was Steve Jobs who said, say no to 1,000 things. And that was so that he could say yes to the iPhone, right? Or the one thing that was going to, really, really change his business. We have to be able to do that same thing. And Todd, you mentioned earlier, I try to stay out of these type calls as much as humanly possible, because I could spend hours every single week on this. And really, this isn't getting me ahead to my goals for this year. I'm here because I want to share with the community, and I love and care for you. But I have to be really careful about all the things that I say yes to, or I'll never get to those big rocks that are important to get me to the goals.
Well, and hopefully you're okay with me sharing this story, but when I got asked to speak at Gary Vee's event, they said, hey, who else do you know? And Josh has crushed it in the online review space. And his response back to me said something along the lines of, hey, that would be really great for my ego, but it wouldn't do anything to create more leads or help my team move forward. And he asked me not to actually submit his name on the list because I sent over a handful of folks from the mortgage coach community. So, I mean, that speaks highly to who Josh is. And that's why when I said I was grateful for him being here, that's why it's not the first time he said no to something. And that is, I guess it's kind of unique, but I also love the fact that he said, yes, I'll say yes to my kids' play. And I think that just comes into the idea that, I looked at it. It's always funny when I pull out some of my old day planner examples when I did Win by Noon, but without actually having the product out. The first one I pulled out I was gone half of a day on a field trip, and I look back and I honestly look in the mirror and say, I probably wasn't as committed as I needed to be. I probably went on that field trip till noon, and then I got back to the office and I just reacted all day. And, you used that word earlier where you said, hey, I do my prospecting and then I react. And what I know now is, and when I got really good at it was, instead, if that was a Thursday and that was my day where I was going to call my realtors, it wasn't optional that I called realtors that week. I didn't bump it to the next week or even to Friday. Either I scheduled time that afternoon, which I wouldn't have. I would have actually moved it then to Wednesday, and I would have just doubled that down onto my Wednesday Win by Noon activities. And how do you address that when people say, gosh, Josh, I just can't get it done. I got to go do these personal things and everything else.
Are you talking about like loan officers in our branch?
Yeah. How about loan officers or anyone you've coached, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think it comes back to how passionate are you about hitting your goals, and how much time have you spent around defining your why? And I'm pretty darn fortunate, I guess, that in our branch we haven't attracted a lot of people like that. It's funny, the two people that we recently lost out of the mortgage industry, they were probably the most lackadaisical in regards to defining and creating why and purpose and being intentional about their goals and their daily routine, and they kind of just find their way out of our environment. So I would just get back to, how big's your why? What's the upside versus the downside if you accomplish these things? And we just tend to push those people out of our environment because we're all pretty driven and they feel uncomfortable around us.
It's so funny when you talk about that. I just reached down in my backpack and I grabbed out what I call my ideal week. So if you look at my ideal week, I drive my daughter to school every day, and then I blocked everything off for content creation other than a team meeting, and then the Friday mortgage coach call I do with Dave, and then in the afternoon I pick up my daughter 2 days a week minimum, and then it says react. And so this is my ideal week off of my business plan. And it's interesting because, again, if we talk about the win by noon side of it, right? And I'll just kind of throw these up because I'd love to hear your comments on it, right? I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. And this slide is really bad, so I'm only showing it really quick. Well, let me start with this, right? I believe what gets scheduled gets done. So Josh already said, hey, if I'm going to reschedule my prospecting time, I'm going to put it in the afternoon. It's going to be on my calendar. So I'm a big believer that if you own your ideal week and you own your calendar, then you actually own your business and you own your life. But this is like way overdone, but I'm just kind of showing you this. The left side of this is the instructions from our new launch edition, which is the edition that has the instructions built into it. And so it's got all the win by noon activities built in there, which is really what you talked about, Josh. You said every single day you guys are calling leads that haven't converted. Every single day you're calling people who quite haven't gotten you all of their documentation to issue the pre-qualification that you need. That those are daily disciplines. And I 100% agree. And that's built into what I teach every time I teach Win by Noon. And then the only real difference that I heard, and you can tell me if you guys have any structure around it, is I believe you got to have time to plan and review your numbers, which I know you guys do in your CRM. And then you've got to have time, I just say to put them all together, target date commitments. So commit on Tuesdays to your update calls, commit on Wednesdays to those realtor call or the client calls so that you don't lose them out there to online internet shopping. Thursday, update your realtors on what you talk to their clients about on Wednesday. Make sure that they're set for the weekend to try to protect that weekend from that 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon pre-qual, and then Friday annual mortgage reviews. It sounds like you guys just weave that into the week as part of your daily prospecting time.
Yes and no. I completely agree with you that if you can batch your activities together as much as possible, you will have greater synergy and more fortitude to get those done, because
more efficiency, right? It's more efficiency. It's faster to get it done.
Totally, absolutely true. And everybody knows, and also I think it puts in your head another way of, no, I have to build a bubble around, or I have to protect this day because I have to get these reviews done, or I have to get my realtor updates done. I mean, you can't just go a week without doing your realtor updates. Like you got to get that done. So I think that the common thread is you have a plan, and you have identified when you're going to execute that plan, and then you've created as much protection or bubble around the execution of that plan as humanly possible. If you're rolling into your week and it's like, yeah, at some point this week, I'm going to call my agents, and at some point I'm going to call my pre-approved, and at some point I think I should call my past clients. It's not happening. I'm telling you, you're probably getting 20% of that done. Well, the point is, if you want to let this environment, this tougher environment of 2019, mold you from coal to diamond, you got to be hitting that schedule like 80 or 90 or 100% week after week. I mean, hit your schedule 80 or 90% for 52 weeks and watch what happens to your business. It is not rocket science, right? We could rephrase the wake up early and strike oil to wake up early and follow your plan. And by the end of the year, you're going to be a successful loan officer. I don't care what the conditions are. You're going to figure it out.
Well, and I love that. And I think the key is to come up with your own plan, right? So, I created a framework around Win by Noon and a tool to track it, right? I mean, I think that's sort of the key. And it's, again, it's always funny when I'm hearing Josh talk about this, because if you look at a day, again, this isn't a great picture of it, but, when you look at a day of Win by Noon and, if you look down here, again, you guys aren't going to be able to see it. I should have blown it up, but it's tracking things like on time, handwritten notes, sleep, exercise, morning, evening routine, and a new habit. And the top here, it's what are my top 3 things? What am I going to be intentional about today? What am I grateful for? At the end, it's got a bookend. What are the highs of my day? And then literally just a boring calendar to track all of it so that you can make sure that you're actually looking at your calendar and remembering what to do. As dumb as it sounds, the one appointment I missed this year, which was to be a guest on Dan Trinidad's podcast, he was super gracious because he didn't bring it up live on the podcast, so I had to throw myself under the bus, was because it didn't get written into my Win by Noon. I look at my calendar and I look at what is it I'm going to do today visually. And because I don't have my phone on me 24/7 to have the alarms and alerts going off on it. So I've got everything written down. I'm doing 3 webinars today, and I'm getting my hair cut, very important, after 5 o'clock. But, ultimately, it didn't get written down on there. It got moved. I moved it, and I didn't move it in my planner, and I missed it like that. And so it's making sure you make those commitments. And for most people in sales, it's visual. 80% of you listening are morning or early morning or mid-morning people. And yes, there are the 20% of you who feel like you have more energy in the afternoon, and great, then go schedule your activities. Then just protect yourself. What I found in my research is that even the people who are afternoon people, if they don't truly have it scheduled, right, that idea of what gets scheduled gets done, they don't get to it because they're busy reacting. And then I just love, Josh, that you also have your team all on board with it. This is a team activity. Everyone's doing it. It's not like they're like, oh, Josh does this. Oh, we can still bug them, or, so-and-so's not doing it. Everyone is doing it. So culturally, you guys have built it. And so I would always remind all of you, if you're going to start doing something different like this, you've got to educate the people that are sitting outside your door so they understand why you're doing it.
Yeah, great. And a couple years into us doing the prospecting as loan officers, what we realized was that our processors and our ops staff were the people that were the easiest to distract us. And so a couple years in, I said to our operations manager, I said, hey, what do you think about you having ops go on do not disturb from 8:30 to 10:30, where loan officers won't bug ops and ops won't bug them, and the processors all have their phones. Our loan officer assistants, all of our processors, they all have their phones on going to our office manager as well. So so now it's literally the entire branch is on intense work for the first 2 hours, and that has really helped when we got ops involved as well. And then one other comment I wanted to make, because you asked me a question earlier, and I'm not sure I gave you a great answer. You said, how are you coaching people, or what do you do if somebody doesn't have the fortitude to actually follow the plan, right? And I responded with, check your why and figure out if you've really created a big enough why. But another way to do that is public accountability. So create a group of 2 or 3 loan officers in your team. We do what's called the 5x5x5 challenge, which every Friday morning, I have a recurring appointment in my calendar that pops up, and we have to touch our top 5 realtors. We have to add 5 people to our SOI, from our SOI into our CRM, and then we add 5 people into Home Scout. Home Scout's a home scouting tool that gets people off of Zillow or Trulia. And we send that out via an email to the entire loan officer team. Mine's first, and then everybody replies all and tells us how they did on their 5x5 challenge and any wins, any wins they had that week. So you could create the same kind of a thing where you've got 3 or 4 or 5 people in a group, and every Friday the leader of the group can kick off an email and said, here's how I did on my Win by Noon commitments. And you have to, when you're going to pull your pants down, you start doing your homework and you start getting serious about it.
I like that analogy, and I got like 100 different things going through my head. It's kind of funny because I just launched a thing called the Loan Officer Think Tank, where accountability is a big piece of it, as well as ideas. And I've gotten, so far we're having a blast one day in. So we're not that far into it, but we built around accountability where people turn in their numbers every week. But I'm thinking about maybe maybe I'll throw it out there. Give me till let's just say the 15th of February, I'll launch the Win by Noon 5 by 5 by 5 challenge. So send me an email at todd@winbynoon.com if you want in, and I will figure out a system that on Fridays will email everyone to see how they did on their 5 by 5 by 5 challenge. And maybe we can even talk Josh into participating, but I'm not going to ask him publicly, so you don't have to answer, Josh, because I know your commitments to your team. But I love that whole idea. It's the gamification of it, right? Anytime that you can gamify something and have that accountability, it's a notch up, because you're a super achiever, and that's why you had a coach, right? I mean, those things all come into play to help you get to where you're trying to go.
No doubt. And it's funny as we sit here and talk through these things, and I'm kind of looking back, connecting the dots. Virtually everything that has led to a really successful part of my business today came out of the last crash or came out of coaching sessions with my coaches. And it's really crazy to me to realize that it all comes through work. It all came through a moment of pain and discomfort. And it's how we decide mindset wise to approach that. The first thing I did when I realized I had 2 loans in my pipeline, I was literally at a seminar, a mortgage seminar in Vegas, and I saw Bill Hart give a presentation. I tracked him down. I'm like, I need you to coach me. I'm about to go bankrupt. I'm going to lose my marriage. And he's like, I'm full freak. He wasn't having it. And I knew like 5 people that he was coaching. So I had them all like record on their phone or leave him a voicemail that said, you should really coach Josh Mettle. He's a really great guy. We think you should let him in. And so he finally let me in. But if I wouldn't have taken that mindset of, the sky's falling and it's up to me to do something about it, and I need some help. If that wouldn't have been the mindset, then, I would have been at Cheetah's or wherever the local morning dance club is, just drinking away my sorrows.
Well, it's funny because we always all have this temptation to pull back. And at that time you went all in. And the funny part is I'm thinking the same thing that you're saying, like, there's so much that came out of the crash for me as well. And ironically, had you not, we probably would have met up at some point, but the reason we became friends was because Bill Hart became your coach. And then you jumped into Master's Coach, where, we had the fortune to spend a lot of time together. I'm excited to I'll see Bill tomorrow. So I'll tell him he said hello, even though you didn't.
Thank you.
And, I think there's just such an opportunity for those. I mean, I know some of you are thinking, oh, that's great for you, Josh. You can do this. You have this business. How would you address them going back to the mindset piece? Like, what do you think that that's the first step for them to do?
Yeah, well, I would read those 3 books because all of them have helped me to get to where I am. And I'll just go back to, I'm not anybody special, right? I made it out with a high school education and half a year of college, and didn't really have any unique talents or abilities other than I had, grit and always have kind of had an inclination to accept a challenge. And deep down, somehow I knew if it was hard, it was good. And I just kept learning, and I kept trying to surround myself with people like you and all the coaches I've had over the years to pour into me. And then I'm just a tenacious implementer. Like I'm, if I'm learning something at a seminar, I'm implementing in the seminar. I'm, asking people on my team to do stuff, or I'm, sending stuff to my wife saying, hey, can you help me do this? And I'm just implementing. But all of the stuff that we do, I didn't think of any of these ideas. I've pulled them out of coaching calls. I've pulled them out of YouTube videos from Mortgage Coach. I've pulled them out of masterminds with you. And we just implemented them, and you just take one piece, and then you implement the next piece and the next piece, and then you build a little army around you that will help you, and you march forward. So, the longest journey starts with the first step.
First step, and I love the idea, and I do see you as a master implementer, right? You execute versus talk, and I would just encourage all of you to think, what is that first step? And I wrote that down, tenacious implementer. I think that is really awesome. So I think kind of as we as we kind of roll through here. I'll make sure that we put those 3 books back in the chat because people are on Facebook, because people are asking about those. And then, well, let's wrap up. Let's talk about the weekend for just a minute, because this was a new conversation. One thing I respect about you, you already said it, airplane mode when I get home, and you're unplugged. You've always been pretty good at unplugging on weekends. You've always done a great job of taking vacations with your family. You took a 90-day sabbatical, for heaven's sakes, but you've got this new restore weekend plan you've been doing, and it's super intriguing and something I think people would want to hear about.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to share it. I'm having fun with it. The first thing I would say about waking up in the morning and controlling your time and space in the morning, and I'm just going to go back before I go forward, Todd, is to make sure you have a bookend to your day. Like at this time, I'm done. You know, I'm not mortgage dude. I am dad. I am husband, and I'm really going to do everything I can to get home and start to recharge for the next day. That is so very important for you to have really full mental focus the next morning and be productive. So I started trying to control my weekends a little bit, and I turned 40 this year, and I realized that I can't go out and, you know, drink all night Friday and drink all night Saturday, and then, you know, meet up with a bunch of guys and watch football and drink beer and then show up and have a great week. It doesn't work. And of course I learned that through many mistakes. But so what the perfect weekend for me now, which I've just coined Restore Weekend, is a date with either my wife or my kids on Friday night, because that immediately gets me into, you know, it's time to, you know, go back to your core, what's most important. And then Saturday, I have a workout with my wife that we do together in the morning. And then I immediately go to, well, in the morning, I would still have my morning routine. So I'd still be up early. I'd still be drinking my water and taking my vitamins. I'd still be meditating, trying to meditate, unless there's something crazy like a soccer game for kids. And then I'm into the morning workout. And then I found this place called Restore Cryotherapy. Every city's got something like this, where they do compression wraps for joints. They do ultra infrared saunas, which is great for detoxification and mental clarity. And then I do a cryotherapy afterwards. So I do about a 90-minute session at this Restore Cryotherapy place. And I'm feeding my body, I'm clearing my mind, I'm reading the, you know, David Goggins book. I'm not responding to email. This is time for me to watch a YouTube video, to feed my mind, and to really take care of my body. Saturday night, you know, usually we're going out and doing something with friends. Sunday is our cooking day. So we try to get out in the morning as a family. We either hike or go skiing. That's been our ritual in the winters, to go skiing. We come back at around 2 or 3, and then we're cooking for the whole week and preparing our meals for the week ahead. But the whole weekend now has a rhythm or a pace that's all about recharging, or restoring, not about emptying the tank, because I'm conscious that at 40, I can't have the energy to run the way I run without having some downtime and some connection to family, and to let my mind just get off of the work cycle.
Well, and I think it's really critical. And the reason I appreciate you sharing that is, I think what I have found and what I've observed in other super producers like yourself in all industries is that the routine and the mindset spills 7 days a week. It's not I'm on here and then I'm off. It's so hard to be partially. And that's why Bill Hart's new podcast is called Be All In, because I think you have to be that. And so I think that's such a great example of it. You talked about, right, you have to tone it down at night. It's interesting. Daniel Harkavy once told me that the best morning routine starts the night before. And I'm a super nerd, like, you know, now I got those glasses that block out the blue light. I put them on at night, and, you know, screens are going off, and, you know, I'm just getting earlier into bed as many nights as possible, and just trying to wind down so that my brain works. The meditation piece has been huge. It's helped me fall asleep faster. That Stanford study that Josh mentioned earlier showed that people who, after 6 weeks of meditation, were able to fall asleep in half the time, average of 15 minutes versus an average of 30 minutes. And so what I'm hopeful is as you guys are hearing this, you realize, hey, I'm got to take one step. Hey, I've got to actually have a committed schedule. I got to set my intentions. Maybe have a little gratitude in there. Maybe try something different. You know, Josh already said you don't have to get up at 3:30 in the morning. That's always scared me. I'm a I'm a sleep cycle guy. So I just look at what time I'm going to bed and I set my sleep cycles based on that, because my kids are older and we don't go to bed quite that early. And see how what can you apply to you? How can you adopt this to your life? Will said in the chat, right? He said, we once heard swipe and adapt. And Josh just told you, although he says none of his ideas were original, he definitely has original ideas. But a lot of what we're all doing and what we built our success on was looking and observing other people and implementing it in a way that worked great for us, right? What else do you think, Josh, as we kind of wrap up in the last 5 minutes?
Well, I think this has been a good call. And I think it starts with mindset to get ourselves out of the feeling or paranoia that the world is falling, right? The sky is falling. Just let that, you can't control all that. So just let that go away. And then just start focusing on what you can do to build a successful routine, and just pick one piece at a time, right? Hey, I'm gonna shut off and I'm gonna go home earlier. I'm gonna commit to this meditation thing or this prayer thing in the morning, and I'm gonna start focusing on this idea that I've had in my mind for business, but I've always been too busy to get to it. And just start working yourself step by step into creating a great routine. There was a quote that I always butcher, but it's such a wonderful quote. And the quote is, success is not something you achieve by chasing success. Success is something that is drawn to you by the person that you become. And I think a lot of times we get so busy chasing success, but we're not focusing on the person that we want to become that would attract that success. So I think that really is the fundamental of what we're trying to communicate on this call.
Well, and I really love it. It's funny because I forgot to do, if Dave was here, he would have highlighted when you talked about what your other required disciplines on your team are, is that they're all required to do TCAs on all of their transactions.
That is true.
I got to the end without that commercial. And then the other thing that Dave had me do this week was create this one last slide that I'll throw up here, which is where you can get the Mortgage Coach edition of Win by Noon. When you go there, we set up a special landing page at his request with a couple of freebies for you guys. And I do get the question all the time, what's the difference? Currently, the only difference is the limited edition branding on the cover, because the inside is the same. At some point, all of them, because whether someone uses the Mortgage Coach edition or not, it tracks TCAs and annual mortgage reviews, two critical things for this community. And eventually Dave will probably say, gosh, we should add in this, and we'll do it. In fact, I probably should throw it out there. I'm gonna twist Josh's arm someday. We'll have the Josh Mettle version of it, kind of like the Air Jordan shoe. We'll have the Win by Noon Josh Mettle edition, where we'll have to start earlier. I think we start at 5 a.m. now, but we'll have to start at 3:30 so that Josh can schedule all of his stuff in there.
Yeah, I'm ready for that. You let me know when you're going to start at 3:30. That was the first thing I noticed when I opened that Win by Noon. By the way, I was like, yeah, you cut off my page at like mid-morning. What happened here, Todd?
We've actually, I think it goes from 5 to 9 in the brand new launch edition. Let's look and see. Yeah, it goes from 5 to 9. And originally I only went to 7, and I had a realtor. She told me, we always joked about the fact that the realtor edition should be called Wake by Noon. But she told me that she said she's up early, but she doesn't start working until noon because she's an afternoon person, and that she actually wins by 5. She does her 5 hours of proactive stuff and shows houses till 8. And thought, all right, we can shift for you. So that was a lesson learned. So that's good to know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know that it's all that important that it happens at 3:30 in the morning versus 6:30 in the morning versus this gal, her schedule. But what's important is that you do have a routine. You do identify what your rocks are, and then you start to protect those rocks as much as humanly possible.
Well, I'm so appreciative, Josh, that you took time to be here. Super appreciative of all of you who are here on the call and, took your time to be here. The conversation will absolutely continue on the Facebook page. So those of you who are there that are commenting within the chat on Zoom, great, jump over there. We can do that. We've got Renee, who's also up at 3:30 since 1993. Holy smokes.
Yes.
So that is awesome. And I don't think Josh was even born then, but that's okay. I think it's, as someone who's been fortunate enough to observe this transformation that you've gone through, I just want to say, you set a great example for all of us. I want to say, congratulations. I know you don't want to pat yourself on the back, but I would say congratulations for the success you have. And certainly the community wishes you future success. And I know you're humble enough to know it's not going to be a straight line up, that there's going to be some of this. And I know you'll continue to come back here and share. So really appreciate everything, Josh.
Well, my pleasure, man. And quite honestly, if it wasn't for relationships like my relationship with you and with Dave Savage and the mortgage coach community and all the hundreds of YouTube videos I've watched, that's a huge part of my success. So I'll echo that back to you. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Well, on behalf of Dave Savage and the team at Mortgage Coach, myself, Todd Bookspan, and Win by Noon, thank you, Josh. Thank you all for being here, and we will see you on the next call.
See you guys.